Hare Krishna. My name is Krishna Rupa, and I serve here in Australia as the Women's Minister. I'm also a member of the National Council, and domestic violence has been a very important issue for me over many years, hearing different stories from devotees, and as in my role as Women's Minister, a lot of devotees contacting me requesting help. I also have been delivering a seminar on domestic violence called Love Shouldn't Hurt. And I'd like to present a few little things here for you, the audience, dear audience, just to give you a bit of an overview of domestic violence, how it impacts us as a society, and also relevance for the Sastra. So domestic violence is actually a serious issue throughout the world. Unfortunately, it's also a serious issue within our movement. Devotees around the world in every country are actually experience such abuse as domestic and family violence. In Australia, we call it domestic and family violence. In America, it's called domestic abuse. So in many cases, the victim is actually unable to leave the abusive partner for a variety of reasons. Some of these would be perhaps financial restrictions, fear of the abuser, fear of homelessness, the stigma attached to a failed marriage, fear of not being believed. And, you know, I would like to stress that although statistically, it's mostly women who are the victims of domestic and family violence, but it also women can be perpetrators as well. So it's very important to keep that in mind. So we take note of deaths due to domestic violence, but we can overlook other consequences. For example, we don't count the physical and emotional injuries, the hospitalizations, the disabilities, and the often lifelong injuries to mental health or psychological well-being. And that includes also for children. All of these issues make lifting oneself and one's family out of poverty, for example, immensely difficult without coordinated, effective support. And Srila Prabhupada, he wanted us to live harmoniously and happily in the house that he built, not only for us, but for the whole world. If our behaviour sometimes falls short as a devotee, then we need to examine ourselves very carefully. And it's not about presenting one face when we're at the temple and then another when we're home behind closed doors and in the privacy of our own homes. So just think, I often use the example, think if Prabhupada came and knocked on our door, what would he find? Would he find a house that is a home, a peaceful and non-violent shelter, a home that Krishna in our hearts would be pleased with, inhabited by devotees who are gentle, communicative, and trying to serve Prabhupada in a sincere way, both at the temple where everyone can see us and in the privacy of our homes where the Lord is surely witnessing. It's easy for us to put a Krishna conscious face at the temple, but we need to experience Krishna consciousness as an authentic, complete spiritual experience in public and in private. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen if we are sincere. So there's a clear understanding that preventing and responding to family violence does require action from all sectors of society. And that also includes faith communities like ours, and faith leaders like our managers, our ministry. They have an important part to play in this area as well. And although Krishna consciousness, we don't have as many wonderful shelters, for example, professional help that is found in the outside world, but still there are many individuals in our movement And the GBC, of course, has passed the resolution condemning domestic abuse or misusing our philosophy to condone domestic violence. So, we are making headway. We're making some steps. So we can ask, well, what do our sastras say? So in Madhya Lila, in 24:272, verse 272, it states that a man in devotional service is automatically non-violent. He is the best of gentlemen. And of course, we can also apply that to the women as well, that we should be gentle ladies and non-violent in our communication. And then in Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, chapter 8, verse 5, in the purport, it states the protection of women maintains the chastity of the society by which we can get a good generation for peace, tranquility, and progress of life. And in that same purport, it says the protection of children gives the human form of life its best chance to prepare the way of liberty from material bondage. So just looking at that second quote, the quote from Srimad Bhagavatam 185, I like to think, what does that protection mean? The protection of children, the protection of women. It's not that the protection means the power to lord it over your dependents or the vulnerable. That's not true protection. Protection is based on respect. And as an organisation, we need to be honest and not gloss over our bad behaviour. Transparency combating such anomalies shows integrity and strength, which is the finest preaching tool. So, we can be honest with ourselves and admit to ourselves, I've got a problem, or I'm in a problematic situation. What can I do about it? Of course, safety is a very critical issue in a domestic abusive situation. The abused has to think very much about his or her safety, as well as anyone who's trying to help the person who's in a domestic and family violence situation. So no sizable organisation escapes unwanted elements creeping in. So we're all part of, we came from this macrocosm of the material, hemisphere, the material world. ISKCON is a microcosm. So our roots are still there in the material world. And this process of Krishna consciousness is a process of purification. And it's another thing we need to be aware of too, is that to differentiate the difference between a domestic abusive situation and a conflict in the marriage. Of course, often a marriage will have some conflict. That's, that happens, but it can't be abusive. So conflict might mean there is some quarreling, some, maybe even some shouting, but it's not repetitive. It's not, psychological or emotional abuse. It just might be a small conflict. And if there is a conflict in the marriage, then it's very important that the husband and the wife do seek professional help. It's very important. Otherwise, that conflict will actually become something that's there all the time instead of an occasional thing. And there's no shame in seeking professional help. No shame at all. And in Bhagavatam 4th Canto, chapter 25, verse 36, in the purport there, Prabhupada says the wife is the cause of all kinds of success in religion, economic development, sense gratification, and ultimately salvation. When one accepts a wife, it is to be understood that he's being helped in his progressive march toward liberation. So, conflict is not always violence. It can just be a difference of opinion or thought. But resolving those conflicts with debate, pleasant debate, collaboration and understanding, these are hallmarks of healthy and safe relationships or communities. So please, if you are having some conflict in your marriage, seek some professional help. And there are some excellent marriage counsellors available. And also just a little bit more on women, because statistically women are generally the most vulnerable and victims of domestic violence. And Prabhupada says on a morning walk in Bombay in 1974, he said, these women are not ordinary women. They are preachers. They are Vaishnavas. By their association, one becomes a Vaishnava. And in third canto, chapter 23, verse 1, in the purport, Prabhupada says, the wife is dependent on the husband. And if the husband is a Vaishnava, then naturally she shares the devotional service of the husband because she renders him service. This reciprocation of service and love between husband and wife is the ideal of a householder's life. So, you know, what does that mean? It means reciprocation of service and love, not imbalanced power and control. And in the next verse for that same chapter, Prabhupada says the husband is a very intimate friend. And Prabhupada also continues that, you know, if there's something wrong, the wife should tolerate. But he's not referring to the toleration of violence in the home. He's referring to perhaps a cranky husband, not a violent one. So it's very, very important that we understand that this is a great apparat to be violent to a vulnerable member in your family. It's untenable, it's asastric, it's asastralayam. And Prabhupada also stated that women devotees are angels. And if you offer obeisances to them, you will be liberated. So offending a Vaishnava, male or female, it's a very great offense. And it's very, very important that we acknowledge that this is not a behavior that is sustainable. So next I'll go on to a definition of domestic abuse.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,